This portion of the John Fredericks Show is brought to you by Hargrave Military Academy. Attend an educational and informative open house event at Hargrave Military Academy in Chatham, Virginia. For more information, visit online at hargrave.edu. Hargrave Military Academy. Build his future.
Joining us now live in Cairo, Egypt, CBS veteran correspondent on the ground in Egypt, Eddie Yeranian. Eddie, great to have you with us again, bud.
Thank you for having me, John. Yes, it was a bit of a soap opera yesterday watching Lindsey Graham and John McCain talk to the press here in Egypt. In fact, they did it at the U.S. Embassy, which was supposed to be closed. I guess it was only closed because it was for media purposes. But anyway, they said things that angered a lot of Egyptians. Certainly, we could hear the opposition or the supporters of the new interim government on the Arabsat channels venting their spleens about what Mr. McCain said, especially about there being a coup. He even got into a tussle with Al Arabiya correspondent, who is probably one of the most knowledgeable people about what's going on here in Egypt, as to whether this was a coup rather than the one against former President Mubarak, and what was the difference. But in any case, it looked to me, just sitting there and watching, that it was they were trying to lecture the Egyptian people, which is not a good idea, especially now with this current of anti-Americanism running very, very deep.
You know, in the immortal words of Hillary Clinton, what difference does it make is my question. I don't know, what exactly is it that McCain said out there that got the ire up of some of the Egyptians in government and others? Just be specific if you can.
Yes. Well, I guess the best quote was Lindsey Graham saying, in a democracy, you have to talk to people you don't like, and you can't talk to someone who's in jail. Of course, in Egypt, that is not correct, because former President Mubarak used to talk with the Muslim Brotherhood leaders in jail quite regularly to negotiate. So that's entirely wrong. And I think what angered Egyptians most was McCain was pressing to have, both of them actually, but McCain specifically, to release the prisoners, the Muslim Brotherhood leaders who are now in jail. And most of the Egyptian analysts that I was listening to were making the argument that that was the exact wrong thing to do, basically because these people control the bank accounts, and once they get out and they have their money again, they're going to go renting more crowds to pour out into the streets of Cairo and create more trouble. And personally, I think there's a bit of truth to that.
What is John McCain's and Lindsey Graham's objective? What are they trying to do there, in your judgment?
Yes, that's a very good question. We've discussed this before on the air, both on the air and off. Obviously, McCain went to Syria, was trying to push the U.S. Congress to arm the Syrian rebels. The suggestion there, at least from a number of analysts, was that he was doing that for President Obama, since President Obama did not want to put his prestige on the line. Of course, the White House spokesman said on Monday that the two senators were representing the Senate and not Mr. Obama. But of course, I've seen in the press, multiple press outlets, media outlets saying that they were representing President Obama. So I'm not quite sure whether you can take that denial at face value. I think there's an enormous push to get these leaders released from jail. You have to ask yourself why. And my suspicion is that if they were released, they would go out there and say, hey, we're now in power again, and we'd be right back at square one. And perhaps there are a lot of people in the West that want that to happen.
You've got to ask yourself this question, I think, Edward, which is, with John McCain and Lindsey Graham, the new neocon twin poster guys, if you will, would they be happier if the Muslim Brotherhood was still in charge? I mean, you got to legitimately ask that, right?
Yes, well, I was talking to one of my best analysts that I use in Egypt stories, and he said at one point, this is not recent, but he said that when the Senate came to meet with Muslim Brotherhood leaders last year, one of the senators said, well, they're like Texas businessmen. We can do business with them. And I was thinking to myself after that, oh, gee, does that mean they're giving them bribes? And I was thinking, wow, we don't do that in the U.S., do we? Perhaps we do. You know, the Emir of Qatar, who was supporting the Muslim Brotherhood, he's known to give bribes to everyone. So you might have to ask yourself on this one specifically where the money trail is.
It's just mind-boggling to me why John McCain and Lindsey Graham would go out there. And I was saying on the show, Edward, yesterday that I think John McCain needs to go back to Phoenix, go to Arizona, go to Mexican border where there's supposed to be a fence, and try to stop the flow of illegals that keep coming in, and not be concerned about what Egypt is doing. I mean, I can't for the life of me understand why John McCain and Lindsey Graham, who we know are interventionists anyway, are in Cairo trying to lecture the Egyptian people who just turned their government over, and it was definitely had popular backing. Every survey in Egypt shows now that what happened there has the popular support of the people. So what exactly, I can't understand, what is John McCain and Lindsey Graham's endgame here?
Yes, one of the political representatives of an opposition party was saying on Arabia TV just moments ago before we went on the air that there was some kind of deal, and I've heard this from many people on the air recently, but I don't want to attribute it to anyone specifically, that the Muslim Brotherhood had some kind of deal with the Obama administration over a sale of land in the Sinai. I'm not sure if it was for a corridor between Gaza and the West Bank, or whether there was a plan to put Palestinians in the Sinai. But some Egyptian opposition leaders actually said they found papers in the Muslim Brotherhood headquarters to that effect. Now, I can't corroborate that, but there have been so many people saying that there must be some fire if there's smoke.
I mean, it just doesn't make any sense to me at all. And, you also don't know who they're representing. As you said earlier, some people think, well, is McCain and Graham basically bringing Obama's message there? It's garbled. No one knows. And I just don't know why you would go to Egypt at a time like this, basically stick your thumb in the eye of what is now the Egyptian government, whether you think it's legitimate or not. They're in charge, and they're a lot more friendly to the U.S. than the Muslim Brotherhood would ever be. So it's inconceivable to me what these people are trying to do, and nobody's asking the questions. I mean, we're bringing the quotes back, and they're all over the news, but nobody is saying what exactly John McCain and Lindsey Graham, what exactly do you want to have happen when you get back on the airplane and come home? And no one can seem to answer that. Other than the fact that they want to open their prisons up, which is none of our concern at all. I mean, Egyptians aren't coming to the U.S. telling us to stop surveilling every telephone call that's being made, are they?
Yes, I think there's a great sense that the U.S. is meddling in the affairs of Egypt. I mean, everyone meddles in everyone's affairs these days, so I don't know that it's unusual. Certainly the Egyptians were ready to listen to everyone. Perhaps they were tacitly agreeing to this mediation, but today they've announced it's failed, and I think the sense was that the U.S. was trying to save the Muslim Brotherhood and bring them back and resurrect them, and I don't think anyone here really wants that other than the hardcore Islamists.
And how is that in the best interest of the United States? I mean, this is what absolutely makes no sense. How would getting the Muslim Brotherhood in any form of authority in Egypt be a positive event for the West, for freedom, for the U.S., or for anything else? Do you have any idea? I don't.
I can't imagine. No, I can't imagine. And I think somebody in the White House press corps should ask that question of Mr. Obama, because it's a very pertinent question to ask.
Well, that's why we ask him right here on the John Fredericks Show. Edward, always a pleasure to have you on. We're out of time. Edward Yeranian live in Cairo, Egypt, veteran CBS News foreign correspondent.
This portion of the John Fredericks Show is brought to you by Hargrave Military Academy. Attend an educational and informative open house event at Hargrave Military Academy in Chatham, Virginia. For more information, visit online at hargrave.edu. Hargrave Military Academy. Build his future.
Joining us now live from Cairo, Egypt, is our man with the plan, veteran CBS News correspondent, Edward Yeranian. Edward, how are you?
Good morning, John. I'm fine. I don't think Egypt is in good shape right now, but as you said, we're looking for the truth, and we'll do our best to find it.
Well, it's tough to find out right now. You know, the mainstream media is all over the Muslim Brotherhood in a positive way, trying to spin things out of control. You're right there. Give us the truth. What went down this weekend?
Yes, John. I think that the Muslim Brotherhood tried to march their protesters into several targets which were sensitive, and they got into trouble. I think they were looking for trouble. They're also saying they want to march them into the Defense Ministry and the Military Intelligence Building. And now I'm hearing on one of the SAT channels that they're going to try to hold sit-ins in front of the embassies. Now, of course, if you were in Washington and someone was holding a rally on the mall and suddenly said, we're going to march to the Pentagon, I think someone would get upset.
Well, I mean, yes, I think that's the story that's not being told. Obviously, you know, no one wants to see the kind of carnage that we saw over the weekend. And, of course, when you're firing on your own citizens, it's all bad. But, Edward, you make a compelling analogy. I mean, if thousands of U.S. citizens were marching on the Pentagon with sticks and stones or whatever else they had, Molotov cocktails, I mean, you could only think of what the result would be. And so I think you've got this, it's a powder keg in there. And what exactly were the Egyptian military supposed to do? Stand there?
Yes, and I'm not even sure that they're the ones that fired first. You know, the Arab SAT channels are divided. Arabia TV is supporting the Egyptian military, and Jazeera is supporting the Muslim Brotherhood. And each of them had competing videos to show the opposite, that the army fired first on Jazeera, and on Arabia that it was the protesters that provoked the army. So you really can't come to any conclusive decision. The New York Times, the last time we had one of these shootouts in front of the Republican Guard headquarters about 2 weeks ago, they used inconclusive video and wrote a piece saying that, but we think at the end of their piece, we think that it was the army that fired first. I mean, you know, that's pretty biased. Well,
it is, and they have absolutely no idea. And you got to ask yourself this question. I mean, the Egyptian military is not stupid. They know they've got $2 billion of U.S. aid here that they need hanging in the balance. I mean, why on earth would they go inciting something and be the first ones to shoot? Just logically, Edward, it doesn't make any sense at all to me.
Yes, and after seeing what happened back in 2011 against Hosni Mubarak in January and February, the press for many months was talking about Palestinians that were shooting at people in Tahrir Square, trying to create chaos. There's a building that used to house Hosni Mubarak's party that was set on fire by people we could not determine who did that. And there was a prison breakout, which was led by, Hezbollah, Palestinian factions, and allies of the Muslim Brotherhood. So a lot of mysterious things happened in 2011, which leads one to ask oneself what they're up to right now.
You got to ask that question. Look, I guess, the good news is the Egyptian military does not have drones like we do, spying on U.S. citizens who are flying overhead. But again, I don't want to defend the Egyptian military because I don't have the facts, but I don't want to indict them either without the facts. So I think as a legitimate journalist here, you got to take a step back and try to understand what's happening. And the other issue is that if you go back to your analogy, in the U.S., you can't march on public property, right?
Yes, I mean, if someone were marching in front of the White House, I mean, they get very sensitive about that. Pennsylvania Avenue is closed off. I mean, there are protests. You can hold a minor protest, but if you suddenly start coming with a crowd of a couple thousand people and with sticks and stones and God knows what else, Molotov cocktails, you would I think the Washington police would intervene.
I think so, and certainly if somebody fired a shot, they would fire back, and then chaos would ensue when you have a mob of that size. But look, it gets down to this. U.S. mainstream media, led by the New York Times and others, the Washington Post, what have you, foreign correspondents, you can almost predict what is going to be said between now and whatever time this plays out, because they're upset that the Muslim Brotherhood is no longer in control of Egypt. And so they're going to find every possible avenue to impugn the Egyptian military, which by all accounts did what they had to do to save the country from falling into complete economic chaos. It had the backing of a majority of the people. I would say that from everything that I've studied on it, if an election were held today, the Muslim Brotherhood would get beat there by an overwhelming margin. So I don't understand why we have to continually get involved on the side of the losers.
Yes, what you say about the Muslim Brotherhood, first of all, the foreign correspondents, many of them do is that you can see them taking the talking points of the Muslim Brotherhood spokesman and just putting them in their pieces. And the problem with that is I speak Arabic, and I listen to their spokesman. What they say in English and what they say in Arabic are two different things. So you come to the conclusion after a while that they're lying. If they say one thing in English and another in Arabic, and then the Western media always listens to what's being said in English, and it's after 26 years in the Middle East, I mean, I kind of know where these people are coming from. You know, if they say one thing in English and another in Arabic, then there's a problem there.
So that's really the crux of it. So, you know, Edward, you've been there a long time, as you say. You speak Arabic, so they can't pull the wool over your eyes. Obviously, they're saying one thing to one group or something else to the other group in order to spin whatever it is that their position is. But why is mainstream media taking the Muslim Brotherhood position hook, line, and sinker?
Yes, that's a very good question. You know, many people in Egypt believe there's some kind of a plot going on from the outside. Outside powers want to impose something on the country. Certainly you heard that same narrative in Syria. The Syrian leader, Mr. Assad, and his cronies were saying the same thing about Syria. And initially, I mean, I thought that was all bunk. And I remember when I went to Lebanon, people telling me they thought there was a outside plot there too, and I thought that was bunk too. But you know, the longer you spend in the Middle East, the longer you see these outside forces pulling in one direction, pulling in another direction. I mean, for instance, the White House this morning, actually it was yesterday, but we're seeing saying that Egypt has a moral obligation to protect free speech and the right to peaceful protest. Well, that's wonderful, but as I said before, if you march your crowd into the defense ministry or to the White House, I mean, that's not peaceful, and that's I don't know if anyone has a right or a moral obligation to protect that kind of free speech.
I think you hit it on the head. That's really what the issue is. No one. I mean, you have to defend your government office, you know, your government apparatus from being overrun by mobs, and I think these people have proven that they can be as certainly as dangerous as others. And so, whenever you have this kind of a situation, and both sides have weapons, you know, something bad is going to happen. The other question is, where did the protesters get the weapons? That's the other issue that no one's asking that question in the mainstream foreign press media.
Yes, a lot of these weapons, there are two places that I've heard, at least from the speculation from the Arabsat channels. One, a lot of weapons that were coming in from Libya. Obviously, the country has a very porous border with Libya. There were a lot of weapons there during the fighting. Colonel Gaddafi had a large stockpile. Those weapons were pillaged and plundered. Also, the Egyptian police stations were attacked back in 2011 when Mr. Mubarak fell, which is why I was saying one needs to ask oneself who is doing what behind the scenes. And so there are a lot of weapons out there that would not normally have been here. And the Hamas people are on the same side as the Muslim Brotherhood, because this is the same group. Hamas was the Muslim Brotherhood branch in Gaza. Gaza used to be part of Egypt from 1948 to 1967.
Okay, Edward, now let's get to former President Morsi. We understand that today he's actually being transferred from house arrest to an actual jail cell. One foreign correspondent had a chance to interview him. He was fine. He's reading the news every day. Doesn't seem to be in harm's way, right?
Yes, Catherine Ashton, the European Union's foreign policy chief, was taken by the military overnight to see Mr. Morsi. She was taken on a military helicopter, so one can speculate about how far away he is from Cairo. If I were the military, I'd take him to the Siwa Oasis, which is near the Libyan border, since it's far away from what's going on here. He apparently, when she spoke with him, he said that she said she didn't want to put words in his mouth, but that he was being treated well. And the question now is whether this judiciary sentence on him is going to kick in, or whether they're going to get back into the political negotiating game.
Okay, Edward, I tell you, you hit it on all the cylinders today. We appreciate your time and your insight. Edward Yeranian, senior foreign correspondent with CBS News Live in Cairo, Egypt. Edward, stay safe. Thanks for the time.
Thank you for having me, John.